case or about sports. And I just intellectually was interested in political science. That's what I majored in. I was interested in politics and the law, but really, I think my true passion and love was sports. And I went to Brown University to play basketball. So not quite the level of players that I coach, but it was a really huge part of my life and something that was really important to me. Well, when I was a college athlete, you immerse yourself in it. And I had so many friends, whether it was at my school or at other schools, who loved their experience or who really hated their experience. And most of the time that was reflected by how they felt about their coach and their team culture. It was not really about how the dorm food was or whether their biochemistry class was big or small. And so while I was in college, some different life things happened, but I found my pull to say, I want to coach college basketball because number one, I couldn't believe there was a job where you get to do X's and O's and watch basketball all day. But more importantly, I felt like I could have an impact on this age group. So right after graduation, I wasn't good enough to be a pro. So I started to look for coaching jobs, and I got my first coaching job right away at Syracuse. I was an assistant at Syracuse, the University of New Hampshire, University of Richmond, all on the East Coast. Then I came out to Cal Berkeley as an assistant, got my first head job at Santa Barbara, returned to Cal as the head coach, and my career was sort of in a good place. And then all of a sudden, the NBA called. And I'll give a little background on that. When you're a head coach in college, there aren't that many people in your profession that you can look to for guidance. I had some mentors, but a lot of people become competitors. And so I started to kind of go outside women's college basketball to talk to people and learn. And one of the places I could go was the NBA. I had some connections. And so, I used to go to the Warriors practices. I became friends with Steve Kerr. I made some connections in men's basketball. And then the world started to change a little bit when Becky Hammon, I don't know if you're familiar with that name, but she was a former Wnba player and she got hired by the San Antonio Spurs. And I think that's how change happens. People say, oh, well, maybe women can coach in the NBA. And then Adam Silver, the commissioner of the league, started to say, well, why are we ignoring half the workforce by not hiring women? And all of a sudden, kind of the world started changing. And I started to get some calls, not about myself, but my friends in the NBA saying, hey, do you have any young people who might be a good intern? They wanted sort of entry-level people, which was great. So I got one of my players an internship with the Warriors. I got another player an internship with the league office. And I thought it was great, young females kind of having an opportunity to get their foot in the door. And it was like me 20 years before. Had there been an opportunity, maybe I would have gone into the NBA. I went into college. And that's kind of where it was. And then someone connected me with the GM of the Cleveland Cavaliers. He's now the president of the Cleveland Cavaliers. His name is Kobe Altman. And we texted a little bit. And then he said, hey, I'd like to meet with you. We were both going to be in Chicago for an event. And I thought he was just going to want to meet face to face, pick my brain. And in that meeting, he said, I really want to build a diverse coaching staff. And we want you to consider being on our coaching staff. And in that moment, kind of my world changed. He said, if you're not really interested, think about it, talk to your husband. If you're not really interested, great, we'll remain friends and maybe something will, come back around in a couple of years. And if you are interested, let's talk more about it. And I went home and I mentioned it to my husband, hardly anybody else. And I just felt like I would be doing myself a disservice if I didn't explore it a little bit. Now, I loved my job at Cal. I loved the young women I was coaching. I was very comfortable. But I started to think about a bigger picture. And ultimately, I decided to take a very scary sort of leap out of my comfort zone. It was hard to leave the young women I was coaching, but ultimately I thought my impact, I would be maybe leaving my impact on those 15 young women, but I would be hopefully able to impact 15,000 others or men, or just kind of do something out of my comfort zone. And so at that stage of my career, where I don't want to say it was like at the top, but I was at a comfortable spot, I pivoted and did something really different and got to be part of the coaching staff for the Cavs. I loved it. It was uncomfortable at times. It was scary at times. I was the new person on the block. A lot of the newness was because I had done one thing for 20 years. And while it's still basketball, it was different. I wasn't the head coach anymore. I was learning the league. I knew a lot about the NBA, but I was learning the intricacies of the day-to-day. but the guys were amazing. What I learned was that high level elite athletes value certain things in their coaches that transcends gender. I think the men and women I've coached, they want to know that you can make them better, like that you know what you're talking about tactics wise. And they want to know that you care about them as human beings beyond basketball players. And so I found it really easy to connect with my NBA guys, from, you know, Kevin Love to Darius Garland, the youngest on the team, to the oldest on the team. You know, we had Tristan Thompson, who was a veteran. You know, we had Colin Sexton, who was young. So it was an interesting mix. I really enjoyed it. It was also the first time in my life as a white female in a privileged situation. Generally, it was the first time that I was in a room as the other, right? I was always the only of something in a room. So I think it gave me an even greater appreciation. While I've always feel like I've been an ally, I think it gave me a greater appreciation for what people feel like when they're the only of something in a room. And I was just really a part of my life there. At some point, I felt like I would probably be a head coach again. I didn't know when, where, what level, men's, women's, college, pros. But then USC called me, and it was probably sooner than I would have planned to leave the NBA, but not all jobs are created equal. And USC is a really magical, special place. And they gave me the opportunity to say, you know, USC has not been good in 15 years, but it has this great history. We want you to kind of have a blank canvas to build this thing and make it a special program. And at the end of the day, I think in coaching, that's what you're trying to do something special with a group of people, whether that's NBA players or college women. So I came back to USC. I've been here for a while, and we're just trying to build the culture here and build a championship program. So that's a little bit of my story. I'd love to talk more about whatever you're interested in, whether it be being a female in a male dominated profession, whether it be career choices, college sports, if that's what you're interested in. Just hoping to lend some advice and or insights to you that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Coach, I do have one question. We do have some aspiring athletes who would like to play at the Division I level. As far as possibly maybe going or earning a scholarship to go play at a USC, what kind of characteristics or things you guys look for in students, those type of student athletes, to come and be a part of your program?
Yep, for sure. And every sport's a little different in terms of like when you make connections with players. Like some of the recruiting process starts freshman or sophomore year in high school, some it's a little bit later. But I would say the characteristics that kind of are separate from your skill set are, number one, you know, you have to be a strong and committed student. Does that mean every single student's a 4.0? No. But, you know, we will look at transcripts when you're a freshman, sophomore, and make sure that you care about school, that you're on the right track, that you're on a college course program, that your work ethic kind of and commitment to education is, you know, good enough for a school like USC or really for college athletics. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, we are a team 365 days a year. There's only 30 something games. So your character matters. Even if you can, you know, score 20 and grab 10 rebounds, if you're not going to be a productive, positive member of the team, it's hard for us to overlook that. So I think your character and just what kind of teammate you are, what type of person you are, we watch those interactions. We ask, you know, guidance counselors and teachers and coaches kind of person you are. And then the third thing, so academics, character, and then obviously, you know, you have to be elite at your sport. And I would say whatever level you are, find the right fit for you. I think there's a lot of people get caught up on, I want to go to the biggest name school, or I have to go D1, or I have to go to this conference, the Pac-12, but really the kids who are happiest find their best fit. So if there's a school that's a smaller school that's a best fit for you and your priorities, I would say look for that versus what might be good for someone else.
Thank you. All right, let's open it up. Do any of you guys have any questions, guys? Aaron, you don't have a question?
I'm good, actually. What year were you affiliated with the NBA?
Coach, a student asked, what year was you affiliated with the NBA?
So the previous 2 years, so not this season, but 2019 to 2021.
Okay. Any other questions? Teachers? Any questions? I know that
men's soccer in America just had like news last week about finally getting equal pay to men.
Yep.
Men's team. Is the same true for the WNBA right now, or what's happening with that?
Yeah, no, definitely not. So the ruling, I think, was for like USA Soccer, the national federation. So it's really quite appalling that the US women were sort of doing everything that the US men were doing, except being more successful and winning more gold medals, and they were getting paid less. And so they took it to court and they eventually won, which is amazing. The WNBA versus the NBA, salaries are nowhere near. So I'll give you an example. And I talk to women's basketball players about this in recruiting all the time. It is amazing that we have a women's professional league now. It's only 25 years old. The growth is still great. I think it's going to continue to get more viewership. But the starting salary in the WNBA, if you are a first round pick, is $58,000. You are not retiring from your earnings as a women's basketball player unless you're in the elite handful that can make money in endorsements. They actually make more money overseas. Evan Mobley, who was drafted to the Cavs actually from USC last year as the number 3 overall pick, is making $9 million a year in his rookie salary. So that's the difference, right? A max contract in the NBA right now, depending on the salary cap, is going to be about, something like 4 or 5 years, $40 million, so $200 million contracts. And the max contract in the WNBA is $215,000. So different revenue streams, the leagues are in different place, but money is certainly not the same.
What does Coach Steve credit that to? That just bias in general between working?
Coach, did you hear that?
Yep. I would say, obviously the NBA has been around for a longer time, but the money generated from the NBA is mostly comes from media rights. And the NBA is such a popular sport worldwide here that the TV contracts pay so much, and then the owners and the players have a revenue sharing, right? So the more money the league makes, the more money the owners make, but they also have a really good labor deal where the players get a certain percentage, which drives up the salary caps. The WNBA is newer. And there's studies that show women sports have to be covered more and invested in, and then we'll actually gain more fans and followers and a bigger following, and then the revenue streams will follow. So it's an interesting time, in our history. Like obviously the female athletes that makes the most money, I believe, are the tennis players, right? Because they're from endorsements, and their prize money at times is equal to the men's, but it's really just the financial model. The WNBA is in a different spot as the NBA right now.
What about the men's and women's national basketball teams?
Yep. I imagine, I'm pretty sure that the compensation there is the same. So for example, if you're asked to play on an Olympic team, there were times where there were some differences, like the dream team or the really famous NBA stars, when they play on that, LeBron and, Steph Curry and everybody, they have to have a little bit more security. And at times at the Olympics, they've stayed in like other hotels, not the Olympic Village, because of the security stuff, but they pretty much treat the women the same with that. Like, so whatever, things the men are going to get, the women are going to get, they stay in nice hotels when they travel, the training camps. If there's a per diem or money for a gold medal, I do think that is more aligned.
All right. Yes, Christina?
Could you speak to maybe an obstacle or challenge along the way as being a woman in sports?
Yep. I would say, so my time in the NBA, the most sort of normal I ever felt was in our locker room, in our coaches' meetings, in the building. I literally wouldn't see sometimes another female for a couple days or whatever in a row. But I wasn't asked questions all the time. Whereas, then media would come and, what's it like being the only female? And do you have to change somewhere else and all of that? But the people that I worked with treated me very much like I belonged. So that was great. The obstacles come, I when I went to the NBA, I had a 2.5-year-old son. He's now 4.5. It's different for me. In the NBA, you travel on 10-day road trips, right? And I had male colleagues who have kids, and they love their children, but they are not the primary caregiver, right? Like they could leave for 10 days and someone else is, taking care of the kid. And for me, it was harder to try to think about that stuff, right? And balance it. And it's not why I got out of the NBA. Like I said, I want to be a head coach again, but one of the appealing things about college for me is here, they let me integrate my family. And my assistant coach has a baby and her baby comes to practice, and I can bring my son around whenever, whenever I need to. So I think the work-life balance thing hits differently for women. And it always has and probably always will, but I want to continue to make workplaces more, friendly, both for men and women who want to balance both things. When you have a lifestyle job, it's not a job where you punch the clock and come in at 9 and leave at 5. So that was one challenge. I would say some other challenges are, just these inherent things, like when you listen to words, right? People say, like in the NBA, when they're looking at NBA head coaches, like, can he command the locker room, right? Does he have the sort of it factor of having been there? Like, and you have some male coaches in the NBA who were not former players. They're short guys who grew up in the video room, but no one says to them, can they command the locker room? But they'll ask if Becky Hammon can command the locker room. So I think you have some inherent biases where that face, women would have to be exceptionally, probably amazing to get one of those jobs that when your first thought is always that it should be for a male. But I've grown up in a post-Title IX era where I feel like no one's ever hindered me from being involved in sports. And, my family was super supportive of finding a profession I was passionate about, not saying, oh, you should do A, B, or C. And that's, I think, one of the reasons that I've been successful.
Anything else? Coach, my last question. So this year for the theme for Women's History Month is breaking the bias. What does that mean or look like to you? You probably already touched on it, but can you just go a little bit more about talking about that?
For sure. I mean, I would say it's, showing up as your authentic, true self. That's the best way to break bias, right? Is to show up without trying. I think women sometimes they let this notion of perfection hinder them. You've probably heard this, but there are studies that show if a job is posted and it says, here are the 6 qualifications you need for the job, women will go, oh gosh, I have 5 of them, but I'm missing one. I'm not going to apply. A lot of men will say, oh, I've got one. That's all I need. And they apply, right? It's a different mindset. And so for me, having to face my fears of going to the NBA and, well, what if these guys don't listen to me? Or what if my experience isn't good enough? Like I had to fight that notion and show up and say, I'm just going to be me and I'm going to learn and I'm going to adapt and I'm going to be flexible, but I'm going to show up and be who I am. And I think that breaks biases because now that gives other women permission to feel like they can do it. Representation does matter. You want, little girls to look at an NBA game and see men and women. You want little boys to look at an NBA game and see men and women. So I would say what it means to me is we break longstanding systemic bias if we continue to just show up in areas, and then help others along the way, and show that we can do the job well. And I will say I was, to me, so grateful for the male allies, right? Like our head coach in Cleveland, our GM in Cleveland, like they put me in positions to be successful. So I will do the same, whether it be for employees I have, people of color or women or men who are trying to, be a first in something. And I think we need to make sure that we're putting people in situations to be successful so that, we break systemic bias.
Okay. Any other questions before we end? All right. Thank you so much, Coach. Let's go.
Thank you all for having me. Kimberly has my contact. If I can ever be of help to any of you in any way, just let me know. And I wish you guys the best of luck in your futures.
Thank you and good luck. Good luck for March Madness.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I'll be in touch. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right.